Hi everyone, thank you for joining me in this live today. If this is your first time talking to me, watching my content, hi, I'm Akriti. I work as a data analyst and AI engineer in a startup where we work on certain AI related solutions focusing on computer vision and natural language processing. After I'm done working, I share my learnings and my journey on Twitter and Medium. Now, just very recently, last week, I started doing this on YouTube. So, thank you for joining me in the initial phase of my journey. I hope this video will be valuable to you. This video is a part of a series called 15 Days of SQL, where every day we come together for half an hour at this time and learn together, share whatever we have learned in the day, which was in the schedule for the 15 days of SQL. If you have not checked this out, go to my profile. You'll find the playlist 15 days of SQL there and follow all of the videos, which would guide you through and build a foundation of your SQL learning. I'm glad to have you here. Let's get started on one of the very interesting and important topics in SQL, which you'd be learning and using a lot. That is aggregate functions. So oftentimes what happens is we have lots of entries, but it's not always like we want to work on them row wise. For example, if I tell you that, okay, you have this data of how many sales you have made per day or how many orders you have purchased, but now I want you to aggregate them according to something. Like, for example, if you want to make a financial analysis, you would want to aggregate how much you've spent per month, right? Or per quarter. So, what you're trying to do here is you're changing the level of granularity and aggregating your several rows together based on some or the other constraint. Correct? These are the aggregate functions which are used to perform on the groups which we have created, which we have aggregated. Again, I'll explain it that we have individual rows. Each row represents an entry in the data set. Now, to get an overall view of the data and get an analysis, because you cannot just present what is happening in each row as an analysis. Anyone who would be going through it would be quick and something which they would be able to work upon. So if I tell you these are my days of 365 days of earnings or spending, what would you do with it? Whereas if I tell you what was my highest grossing month or what was my lowest grossing month or how was the seasonality of my spending, you would be able to get a proper understanding of data without it being too detailed that the necessary parts, the essential parts of it is getting lost. To save us from that, what we do is we aggregate our data into certain groups, and then on each group we perform certain functions using these: average, min, max, sum, count. We perform the functions like what is specified here. Simple English: avg performs the average, min performs the minimum, it gives you the minimum value, max gives you the maximum value, sum gives you the total addition of all of the values present in that group, and count gives you the count of the values present in that group. All of these occur just when you have first grouped data into certain groups based on a value of a column. For example, if I say I want to get my spending by month, so I will group it by my month name. So all of the entries for January would be grouped together. And now when I get the result, it will be against the column name January and I will be performing some aggregate function on it. It can be the average spending or the minimum spending, maximum spending, or the total spending, or how many times, how many orders I've placed in January. So let's look at each one by one and learn how we can use them. And this is very, very essential when performing analysis on data. So hang on till the end of the video and pay attention to this. First, we'll learn how do we actually segregate things by group. So this is how we do it. We have been learning. If you've not checked the videos yet, I recommend you checking the previous videos to know what is select, what is from, and what is order by, covered in the previous video. What select does is it chooses the certain columns which we want. So you can keep it to all of the columns, representing it by asterisks, or you can select particular columns one by one by providing their names ahead of this select clause. Next, you tell them from where you need it, that is the table name. Then, where, this is optional. Select and from are not optional, they are mandatory. Where is when you need to filter data according to some condition. So if I want just data for this year, so I'll say where year equal to 2022. So when you need to filter data based on some conditions, you use this where clause. Next is group by, about which we'll be learning today. And then this is order by. Order by, we have learned yesterday that it is used to order the results in a certain format based on the value in a particular column. It is ascending by default, but if you want it to be descending, you need to specify with an additional keyword, which is DESC. If it was not clear and it was too sped up in this video, I recommend you check the entire playlist and get a better understanding of these concepts. Today we'll be focusing mainly on this fourth line, which is group by. And if you would be using these multiple statements, make sure you follow this order, otherwise your data would be wrongly grouped and the results which you want won't exactly be the results you want. So always follow this order. A few more clauses would be coming in. Make sure this is the order you're following. So now we'll focus on group by. Why is group by used? It is used to aggregate data into subgroups based on some category specified in a column. So here with the example which I was taking was the category were the months. So the month names. So all of the rows which have month name, the column month name as January, the value is January under the column month name, they would be grouped together. Then all of the rows which have the value February under the column month name would be grouped further together. So according to some category specified, and that category specified is the value of that column name, which is month in our example, current example, we perform aggregation and aggregate the rows together into certain subgroups. You can, now currently we'll be focusing on just one group. You can further, from your groups divide it into a higher level of categorization where you further divide them into subgroups. That is not which we'd be looking at right now. Let's get hands-on. This is the tutorial I'll be following. I recommend you to get your workspace ready and use it because I don't want this to be just another theory session. I have shared the link in the chat. Let me know if you cannot access it. I would love to get your recommendations on how I could make the content better. So please open the playground, the workspace in your laptops, because this is not a movie, this is not as interesting as one, so don't look at it. Do your thing without practicing it, without getting hands-on. You don't get anywhere in tech. So you need to be hands-on with what you're doing. Okay, let's go ahead. There are certain types of functions which we just looked at briefly here. Now let's get into these in detail, one by one. First, we'll be having the function count. As the name suggests, very easy to remember because in SQL everything is just plain English and there are not many technical jargons. So the first thing is count. What count does is it returns how many rows were there. So now when I aggregated something based on groups, when I say count, it will tell me what is the count of rows within that group. Okay. When I say count star, it will consider all of the columns together because we know, as we know that to specify asterisk, to specify all columns, we use the shorthand as asterisk. But what the thing is that when you say count and you do column name instead of star, it only returns the non-null values. That is, what non-null means is null is considered as a blank cell in SQL. So whenever you will have a blank cell somewhere, it will not consider it in the count. If there are multiple values like $100, $20, $120, then a blank, and then $40. So even though I have 5 entries, but when I'm saying count spend, it will only consider the values which are not empty. So it will give you 4. It will consider whenever there are duplicates, it will still count them as 1, but as long as the cell they are in is not empty. If you want just the distinct values, that is without any duplication, you want to remove all duplicates, you'd be using count distinct column. Okay? When you use count distinct, what SQL does is it takes the column, takes the non-null values, that is non-empty values in it, and then checks which are the uniquely occurring values there. So the repeated values are not included, they're only included once, and you only get the count of the unique present values within that column. Enough of theory talks, let's go ahead. Let's practice count first, shall we? Yes, here it is. Yeah, okay. I hope you all can access the link. If you can't, just let me know. I am keeping an eye on the chat. Or if you have any doubts also, you want me to repeat something, please let me know. So again, now when we look at the code, we see select count star. Since we are not specifying any group or any condition here, it will simply return the count of all of the rows. Okay. Now, when I say select count high, that is, I am specifying one column, one specific column. As we saw before, it will be giving me the count of all of the entries, all of the non-null entries in that particular column. Now let's try a practice problem. What is the problem? Write a query to count the number of non-null rows in the low column. Whenever they say non-null, we know that in order to get the count of non-null values, we need to specify the column name, and they have also specified the column name, which is low. So what we'll do is we'll say select count of what? So the column name low, and now that we have selected what we want, we would say from, and from we would again specify where we want that column to be extracted from, that is the location of the data set, and that will be specified as database dot table name. Let's run the query and see if it works. Just to give you an idea of what it is, I will do it side by side. So we have count low, and the number of non-null values in count in the column low is 3535. Now let's count all of the rows together. When we say star, we know that we are specifying all of the columns. We are not selecting or hand-picking a column. So SQL will count all of the entries present, and it won't say null, non-null. We'll get a side by side of it in just a moment. Okay, you see how the total count was 3555. However, when we limited our scope to just one column, we removed the blank values while counting, they were not considered, and we only got 3535 values, that is 20 values less than the total count. Why were those 20 values not counted? Because for some particular rows, 20 of them, the column low was blank, and thus it was considered as a null in SQL and it was not counted. I hope this is clear. If you face any difficulties, please let me know in the chat box. Hi, Rolly. I would recommend you learn from here and get your basics sorted. However, without using any projects and without actually implementing SQL there won't be any point even if you add it to your resume, because sure, it is a skill, but they would not ask you how much you know, they would ask you where you have applied it. So making SQL projects is not that big of a deal, and we will be covering this as the days progress. But I don't recommend just getting knowledge, theoretical knowledge, and not implementing it anywhere, because skills, when you're acquiring them, if you don't practice them enough, they just get rusted and forgotten. I would recommend please invest just a few days in creating projects and then list it as a result of your resume, because a lot of times what recruiters do is they are not interested in interviewing or querying you about all of the concepts. They are interested in knowing how you have solved problems through those skills. So solve problems and then list it. It will be an added advantage. It will put you ahead of a lot of people, and you'd have something to talk about in your interview. So please implement SQL in a project. It is not that big of a deal. And learning is always great. You will get the concepts, and once you're aware with all of the concepts in SQL, implement them on a resume, implement them on a portfolio project. That will enhance and increase your chance of getting selected anywhere. And next was Daniel. Please, can you tell me when we have to? Okay, yeah. So I assume that you're specifying the select clause when you say you don't know, or you get confused when to use commas. So commas you have to use when you are giving a list of columns. Say I want 5 columns, A, B, C, D, and E. Okay, and so if you want all of the columns, you will simply say select star. However, if you want just 4 columns out of it, you will say A, comma B, comma C, comma D. So when you want to select or handpick columns, then it is better to use a comma separated list of column names. If you simply want just all of the columns, write star. Whenever you have to specify to one or more column, you have to separate them using commas. I hope that answered your question, Daniel. And regarding Raleigh, if you learn MongoDB, that's great and it is a plus point. SQL basics, rather you can just add SQL to your resume and work on a few case studies, which we will be covering as a part of this 15 days of SQL cohort. So hang on. I hope it helped. Let's go ahead. Sorry if I dragged it. Okay, back to where we were. So now you saw what is the difference between the low count, and now we'll get to this distinct count. So what we'll do is we'll say count, and I want the count of distinct values in my low column. So I'll say count distinct low. Let's see what results it has. Even lesser. So now you see how it first we were getting all of the non-null values from the column low. Second, we said count star, so we were getting all of the rows because we were including all of the columns. So we were not just saying we want non-null values, but even the null values were getting included. So we got all of the rows, that is 3555. But then we went ahead and we said we only want to count the distinct values, that is the uniquely occurring values, and we want to remove all of the duplicates while doing the count. So we said count distinct low, okay, and we got 2916. So now we know that we have more than 1200 repeated values here. Let's go ahead and solve something else. In a similar fashion, you can, here we were counting numeric values, but count function works on non-numeric values as well, like dates and strings. So yes. Now we'll go ahead and look at sum. Sum, as the name again suggests, is used to calculate the total addition of values in a particular column. Here you can't write sum star because there are multiple columns to be considered and they might be different in data types. So you'll get an error and you cannot perform sum across multiple columns. However, when I say sum and a column name, what it will do is, it will do the categorization, okay? It divided my data into certain groups. Now, for all of the rows occurring inside that group, for that particular column name, it will add its value. So if I say I want the total expenditure which I did in the month of January or month wise, so it will take all of the rows which have the month name as January, consider its column expenditure and add all of the values for all of the rows. Then it will again move forward to all of the rows which have February as their month name. It will look at the column expenditure and add for all the rows present within that group. That is how you use. Now, sum can only be used for numeric values, unlike the previous count, which could be used for dates, strings as well. And if there's a null or a blank, sum will treat that as 0. So it won't give you an exception that there is a blank value and what am I supposed to do with it. It will just use it as 0 and move forward. So let's go and practice something from sum. For those of you who cannot navigate to it, I have shared the link. Okay, and now we have the sum. So now we want a query that calculates the average opening price. Okay, now average, how is average in basic math calculated? We take the entire sum and then we divide it by the count of the values. So if I say I have 3 students and their marks are 8, 7 and 5, give me the average marks of my students. So what you will do is we will add 875 and you will divide it by 3, which was the count of my students. So here what it is asking is, even though we have an average function, they want to mess with us and they say you calculate average using count and sum. So they say opening price. So we're using the data set this, and I don't know what is the opening price column named as. So I'll first take a quick overview of the data and then go ahead with taking the average. Hi Harry, nice to have you back. Okay, so there's date, year, month, open. Okay, I feel opening price, so they mean open when they say opening price. So now we know what open is. We'll be performing the sum. Sum would be SUM and we'll say sum open. And then we'll divide it by count division. If you can recall, it's an arithmetic operator and we have covered it in the second video of this series when we were looking at different operators. We got to know that we can manipulate 2 or more columns using certain arithmetic operators and create a whole new different column called a derived column. If you have not checked it out yet, it's under 15 days of SQL and it's called it creates another derived column. Let's see, sum open divided by count open. And I am giving it a name alias as average open, the new derived column which I created. average open, and now we have the average. So now here that we did not give it what to group by, it just said, okay, consider all of the rows, sum it, and then divide it by the count. Okay, good enough. I hope this is clear. And let's move ahead. We have a few more aggregate functions, and then we'll be incorporating them with the knowledge which we gained in the first part of this video, that is the group by clause, dividing data into subgroups and performing functions on it. The next aggregate function is minimum and maximum. As the name suggests, they are used to extract the minimum and maximum value out of a group. So if I want to get, what was my highest earning day or highest earning entry? So it'll perform the minimum. It'll look at all of the values present in the group for that column name. Again, it cannot be performed on all of the columns together using star because different columns have different data types. But it can be used on one particular column, so it will know how to compare it. It'll look at all of the values present in that column within the group. It'll look at the minimum value and then it'll give me the minimum value. The second is max. Max will, as the name suggests, give the maximum value. Okay? So we will have the non-numerical. This, unlike sum, doesn't just work on numerical columns. It'll also work on strings and dates. So if I say I want minimum of some date column, so it'll give me the earliest date. Or if I want minimum of a string column, it'll give me the result in an alphabetical order and the thing starting with the string starting with A. That is, they occur first in the alphabetical order, and so they are counted as minimum. Similarly for max, if I give it a date column, it will return the latest date or the farthest date, and when I give it a string column, it will arrange the data in a descending alphabetical fashion, and so you will get the alphabet which is closest to the end, that is Z. Okay, I hope this was clear that min and max can be performed on all three types of data types. That is, they can be used on numerical data, they can be used on date data, they can be also used on string data. So we will look at the exercise here. The practice problem is, what was Apple's lowest stock price? Okay, let's try it out. Yeah, it's loaded now. So which data set are they using here? They're using the Apple's historical stock price. First, I'll take a quick overview of the data. Also, let me know if this pace is fine. It's not too overwhelming or it's too slow. So let me know. When looking at the data, we see that we have open, high, low, close, and ID. And what it wants is, it wants the lowest stock price. So I feel that what it needs is, from this low, it further wants the minimum out of it. Because that's what low is, right? Lowest. So we'll say minimum. It will operate on the entire column and find the lowest numerical value, because this is a numeric column. Let's run this query and see if it works. Okay, it gives, I guess, $6.36, which means that the lowest value of the Apple stock from whenever that data is was $6, around $6 there. That's what we found out using the aggregate function minimum. It looked at the entire column low and it selected the minimum value out of it. Okay. The next problem is, what was the highest single day increase in Apple's share value? So now let's go back at looking at the data and see what this means. This query will have two parts. We know that we need to have first the highest lowest part, but it is also saying that we want the highest single day increase. Now what does that mean? So for all of you traders, investors here, I feel the single day increase is the difference between the closing value and the opening value for that particular day. That's what I feel is. I'm not very knowledgeable in this area, so please correct me in the comments if I'm not. So what I think is that when it says single day increase, let's look at this part first. Single day increase, it means the difference between the opening and the closing price. So I'll calculate that single day increase by subtracting the opening price by my closing price. Okay, this is used, an arithmetic operator minus is used here to calculate the subtraction, the difference between the closing and opening values. Now it just doesn't want us to do that. If I say just difference, so we selected this, we calculated the single day difference. For each day, we are calculating what was the difference between close and open. And we are getting certain values. This is for each day. Now what the problem required from us was, you want the highest single day increase. So that we'll be getting using the aggregate function max. So we'll just add a max in front of this close minus open. What it will do is, it will look at all of the values present in this column difference and calculate and find the maximum value out of it. So you see the highest difference was $32.58, $32 for a single day increase. So we calculated the increase using arithmetic operator minus, close minus open, and then on that we calculated what was the maximum increase that happened. Let's see the answer and confirm we were correct or not. A suggestion from my side, whenever practicing SQL or anything, yeah, select max, close minus open. We are getting that from the, so it's similar, yeah, we are correct there. Okay, whenever practicing it through such queries, don't go ahead and look at the solution thinking it'll save time instead of solving it on your own. Solve it, give it 10-15 minutes, solve it using different approaches, whatever idea you do. If after solving it 10-15 times also it does not yield result, then look at the solution. Because if you'd be looking at it as some Q&A you have to mug up, you'd never be properly able to understand the things, and when you'd be put into actual job case, you won't be able to type out queries if you're not used to typing queries, solving problems, and you're just mugging up solutions this whole time. So sit down, write something, write this select from, as mundane and boring as it gets. It is actually very interesting, because I have been doing this for more than 5 years, and still I'll come back every day and do something new and still learn something new, some new way of doing things. So sit down, write the queries, get your shit together and learn. Don't look at the solutions right away. Look at them after you have spent a good amount of time. Don't give up right away if you're not able to get it. And this too, don't do at all that you're reading the question and going directly to the solution. This is not a descriptive answer. This is something you'll gain only by practice. Okay, enough of TED talk from my side. Let's move ahead with another aggregate function. which is average. So we have been using average. We know that we can calculate average even before we found out this aggregate function existed. So as the name suggests, it calculates the average of the set of selected values. It can only work on numerical values because again you have to calculate the sum, and sum only works on numeric values. You cannot calculate the sum of dates now, can you? You cannot calculate the sum of strings either. So average works on only numeric values. So out of all of the aggregate functions which we saw, average and sum work only on numeric values, whereas count, minimum, maximum, they work on all sorts of values, that is numeric, string, or date type. Okay? And how it treats the null values is it will not consider it while counting, when dividing it by count, and while performing the sum it will consider it 0. That's how average treats the null values. It, while calculating the sum, it will treat them as 0, and while counting it will treat them as nothing, like it won't consider them. That is what happens when we calculate the individual sum and count also. When calculating the sum function does not consider null values, it considers it 0. While calculating the count, it only gives us the count of the null values and not the total count of rows. I hope this was clear. Let's practice the tutorial here. Write a query that calculates the average daily trade volume for Apple stock. Okay. Average daily trade volume. I think there was a column named volume. Let's see. So first we have our from clause, and I'll look at the data because I have forgotten where the volume was stored. I feel there's a column named volume itself, but let's just double check. There is, okay. So what it wanted was, it wanted the average daily trade volume. So we know that every day is one entry here, and we'll calculate the average volume by using the aggregate function average and giving it the argument by the column name volume. If there are any null values, it won't consider it while calculating the sum or count. They'll be ignored. You have the averages 20 millions. Yeah, 20 millions, close to 20 millions. That's the average volume of trading by Apple in 2014. So I hope the aggregate functions individually were clear. Now we'll be incorporating them with group by. So hang on, and let's go ahead. We have learned about group by. It is used for aggregating certain rows which have the same category specified by a column. So again, taking the example of my monthly expenditure, whichever rows have the same column name, same month name, would be aggregated together into one group. That is what group by does. It will group it together based on the value of one column name or multiple column names as you specify. Let's go ahead. Here, what they are doing in this query is they are calculating the total count. That is, for every year, what was the count of trading entries? So they're calculating the year. They are grouping by year. So what it will do is, all of the rows which have the same value in the column year, like for example, whichever rows have the value 2013, they'll be grouped together. And then this count will work only on that group and not the entire data set. So it will count all of the rows present in that group, and then it will move on to the next year. That is 2014. Then all of the rows which have the year as 2014 will get aggregated together. The count function will count each one of them. It will produce the count, and we'll get the count per year. So let's practice it. Calculate the total name of shares traded each month. Okay. So now we know each month, per month, whenever they say per, by, each, you know that you need to categorize your data into certain groups, and that categorization can only occur using the group by clause. So you will say select, and then we want to select the month name because we want to see by what month we are getting it. And then it wants just the total number of shares, so number of shares. So I feel that number of shares, again this is some domain knowledge thing, but I feel it will be the total volume. That's what I feel would be. Let's try. Even if we go wrong, we can always come back, look at the solution, reiterate. What I feel is the total number of shares would be the total volume. So how can I perform total? That is the sum of volume. Correct? Array, I'm not viewing any data. So I'll select the month, I'll select the value from where. So from my Apple historic stock price table. And I don't have any conditions here that I only want for this and this month, this and this year. So I won't be giving any where clause. Next the thing is order the result chronologically. That will come later. Let's just say, oh. It'll throw an error. Yeah. Okay. So I forgot to group. Group by 1. When I say 1, what it does is it'll look at the order of columns in the select clause, and the first column it'll select. So this can be alternatively written as month. To save time, we can just write 1 to reference it based on its order of occurrence in the select clause. So now it is grouping it by month. What it is doing, all of the months which have the value 3 in it, 3 would be corresponding to March, they will be grouped together, and then on those set of rows which are grouped together under the month 3, we will calculate the sum of volume. That is, we'll aggregate those rows together first and then calculate the sum of the column value in it. I hope this was clear. The next part is order your results chronologically. So we know what to do. We have learned it yesterday. That is, we'll be ordering it by something. Order by, when it says chronologically, you know that you need to do it by a time constraint. Here it will be month. Order by used to order results. It will do it by default in the ascending fashion. Here we want it in the ascending fashion. So you see, earlier it was starting from 3, 7, 11 in a random fashion, but now it is properly organized, and that's how we generally want our analysis to be. So now you see, the first month had this total sales volume, total stock volume of this. What it did, it collected all the rows under 1 month, all of the rows which had the month as 1, they were aggregated together. The sum of volume within them was calculated, and it is represented against 1. Then again it went to 2, it aggregated all of the rows which had their month as 2, and then their sum of volume was calculated. Let's compare with the answer, because I feel like my domain knowledge in stocks might have gotten in the way of my SQL knowledge. But year, month, sum, volume, yeah. But it actually added another level of categorization, which I will teach you in just a minute. So they are using the same things. They are calculating the sum of volume to calculate the total stocks. Here they specified that you calculate for each month. So I thought that no matter what the year is, you should calculate it for just the month. So all of the Januaries were calculated together, all the Februaries, no matter what year, were calculated together. Whereas what they want is per year per month. So whenever we come here, we'll have to further group it by year. So now what this will do is, it will first aggregate all of the rows which have the year 2011, and then within it now it will aggregate all of the rows which have their month as 1. So subgrouping will happen. Within a year group, there'll be again 12 different month groups, and on those groups we will perform the sum of volume. So we'll add a quick year everywhere because we want it to be ordered chronologically. For that we will need year month. How order by works is, if you have in the first specified column you have any ties, it will go again and order it by the second column. In the group by again, you will first make the groups per first column, that is 2011, 12, 13, 14 by that, and then within that group you will again further subgroup with, so within that all the rows which have 2012 as their year, again after 2012 whichever they have the year the month as January would be 2012 and month January, 2012 then month February. Oops. So now what we'll be getting the results at a further level of granularity, that is for 2000 month 1, that is month of January in 2000, what was the sum. So now you first had see all of the year together 2000, then further they were grouped by their months. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 till 12, and for these 12 groups they calculated the volume. Then they went to the next group, that was the year group 2001. Then within 2001 they calculated 12 different subgroups based on the year, based on the value of the column month. Then for those 12 subgroups it calculated sum of volume. Once it was done with these, it went to the next year group. So first it is getting grouped per year. Next, within that group we are subgrouping per month. So now for 2002 again, it aggregated all of the rows with year 2002 together. Within that group, it then further aggregated the month 1 together, the month 2 together, and in those subgroups, it calculated using the aggregate function the sum of volume, that is the total stocks traded on that month. And to organize it beautifully like this, we first ordered it by year, so 2000, 2000, 2000, and then within that year, it was ordered chronologically as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 based on month. That's how you further subgroup by giving it. And now I can add something else here, some other categorization column, and even within that month 1 group in the year 2000, it will further create subgroups, subgroups. So based on what values you give here, it will categorize or subcategorize, and then on the lowest group level, the smallest group that is formed, on that it will perform this aggregate function. I hope this was clear. Thanks for joining me in this journey. Today we learnt about several aggregate functions, that is sum, average, count, minimum, maximum, and we learnt the uses of each, where it is used, what results it yields. Then we learnt how to use them by categorizing our data. So you see how when I just say select star from this, so when I just run this query, you see we get a haphazard way of data, raw data, which is just stored, From this data, I don't think looking at billions of rows of this data, you'd be able to deduce anything. However, when we get it categorized, based on some context, we are properly able to understand what that data is trying to convey and gives the results of our analysis. So, aggregation is very important when trying to reduce the level of granularity and bringing a broader way of your analysis such that it conveys some meaning. So instead of those multiple row entries, now that we have aggregated it per year, per month, now it is a lot more easier to look at and understand. That's where aggregate functions come into play. They help us to give an overview of data and actually gather insights out of that raw data. Thanks for joining me in this journey. Thank you for your time. I hope I'll see you tomorrow. And tomorrow we'll be having another such fun session about case. Yeah, case is used to add another derived column. It's another way to add derived columns based on certain conditions. So it's a way of adding a derived column, not by performing calculations, but by using certain comparison and condition to get another derived column. So I hope I'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you for your time today. I hope this class added value to your life and your SQL journey. See you tomorrow. Bye. If you have any questions, feel free to add them to the chats or comments, or you can add them under the replies on my Twitter. The link would be in my profile. Thanks again. Bye, everyone.